There we go. So will one of you take notes in the document?
Yes, I'll take notes.
Okay, thank you.
We found out yesterday at our team meeting that we were doing this. So I threw a PowerPoint together with some things that I could think about. But one of the things that we, so they don't have, yes, they do have screen sharing capabilities for me. So one of the things that we learned, so we were contacted in mid-December and asked to develop this pilot course. And now we've already like developed it, taught it, it's, it's over. So it was really whirlwind going. And so one of the first things we did was think about, well, teachers teach, it's what they do. And that's a hard job. And so they also have like families and needs, personal needs. And so we didn't want any teacher to have to spend more than about 3 hours if it's school year. Now we are working on a summer course and there will be like approximately 6 hours a week that teachers spend on that. But in the school year, we just didn't think that it would be feasible to ask teachers to do more than about 3 hours of learning time per week. And what we did at first was so ours is routine argument writing, right? And so you know how many C3WP resources there are for routine arguments. So we got like really overly ambitious and we're like, oh, 4 weeks. So week 1, we'll do this, this, and this. We'll do a quick list. We'll do arguments in our lives. We'll do this Beth Reimer video. We'll do this and this and this. And then before you know it, we have like 12 hours of intake, let alone like what the teachers are supposed to do. So a lot of things ended up on the cutting room floor and we kept all of those in, in folders. But what we had to do was once we thought we had decided what was going to go in each of the 4 weeks, we really pared back and thought, well, so while we know kernel essays are great, right? It ended up on the cutting room floor, even though I spent a lot of time putting together the kernel essay portion. And so the way we made those decisions is what parts of this can go away and the teachers will still be able to fully understand and implement what comes next week, if that makes sense. So we decided like what builds on each other. So a lot of really good things went away. So it wasn't that those things weren't good. It's just we had to make decisions about what is building up to next week. So like they say, I say, and say me matter, we ended up having those in the same week. And we knew we had to have the they say, I say before we did at Woody and Table the next week. So slashing is just part of it. I mean, and that as, as teachers and just as people that, you can get over ambitious. So you have to like balance ambition and realism, which I'm not good at, and Haley knows that really well.
She's not, it's terrible.
I'm like, oh, they need this and they need this and they need this and they need this. When really, it would be great if they had all of that, but do they really like need this in order to be able to move to the next week? And so within that 3 hours, you also have to think about, so what's the intake and what's the output? So you can't have 3 hours of intake, right? I mean, so like you can't have them reading a whole book chapter and then doing some, they've spent 3 hours before they've even tried anything or had any interactions with thinking partner. So before I move from this slide, I also want to say, and this is something that came up in our conversation yesterday, when you're thinking 3 hours of time for the teachers to be in a course, or however many hours, we arrived at 3. So however many hours you arrive at, week 1, you have to count in add in the whole learning curve of learning the platform. So I would say, like, for example, ours is 3 hours a week. I would say no more than 2 hours in week one, because teachers are going to really stumble. And then, as we said yesterday, so those 2 hours need to be really good, right? So that 2 hours of learning, teachers need to think, wow, if I learned all this the first week, then I want to keep going because this is really good stuff. So any questions about this slide before we move on? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I have questions, but they'll come. I think they're for later.
Okay, yeah, I do have a question slide. All right, and so then when you're thinking about that input and output, so what are the, so it's like a breathe in, breathe out. So what are the teachers gonna take in, and then they do something with that. So really it's like in teaching, I mean, you wouldn't, like when you're teaching, you wouldn't stand up there and teach for like half the class, right? And then give them maybe half the class to do something. So you have to, I wouldn't think about input and output 50-50. So input can be things like read a snippet of professional text, like maybe a little something about Harris, or maybe a little something about they say, I say. I wouldn't do a chapter. I'd pull some really key excerpts. And again, you want to just give them just what they need in order to be able to do the thing you need them to do. I mean, it'd be great if people read like the whole books, right? And we do that at our site, but teachers don't really need to do that in order to like produce something and try it out in their classroom. So the way we thought about these things was, input might be watching a video or a slideshow or reading a little bit of a professional text. And then we had 3 different types of outputs. So I see Bodie, who can count to 30. I don't think she heard me. So we thought of outputs and in terms of try it. So like a few minutes ago, I was talking about like 1 week was say, mean, matter. So teachers learn about say, mean, matter through a slideshow. That's the intake. And then the output is, they would try it. So they would do their own, we give them some text. They do their own say, mean, matter, which might be in a Padlet or a Jamboard, or they might post it in the discussion forum. So I know this is not the section where we're talking about tools, but you want the tools to be like free, and you want the tool to be invisible. So you don't want to choose a tool that teachers are going to have to like spend a lot of their cognitive energy learning to use the tool, right? You want that to be focused on the argument writing skill. So so the tools need to disappear, but teachers do need to, just like we do in PD. So they're the learners. They're trying it out as a learner. But then we also had, there was always a try it, like try this out in your classroom with your students. And we gave them options. So you can try it out exactly the way we did it with you, or you can, put your own twist on it, or like, use your own text. But we did always ask them to try something out in the classroom. So I don't know what your situation will be, but like in our situation, of course, we tried to make it applicable to upper elementary and secondary, which takes some thinking. And then we also, in our course, we had people who don't have students. So there might like be a Carla, or there might be a Rachel, or there might be a Robin, and we don't have students. So a lot of people would try it out in PD. So like we had a bunch of folks from Field Whip, Robert's site, and they were there to learn some argument moves for their summer institute. So like they were thinking of the text that they're gonna use in their summer institute, and how can we implement say, mean, matter, or at table, or they say, I say. So you need to make it, your things flexible and transferable enough for wide audiences. And so, and an output might be respond to another learner in the discussion forum. So you want to build community as much as you can. So like we would say, post a Harris move. So like, here's a piece of evidence, comment on it, post it in the discussion forum, and then comment on 2 other people and see if you can identify the move they made. So is it extending? Is it, you know, illustrating whatever those moves are? And then there was always, always, always an interaction with a thinking partner. So like we gave feedback on everything they posted anywhere, but there were some things that like only we saw. So like typically they're lesson plans. So they submitted those to us and we gave feedback. And then there's always a reflection. So I don't know if y'all are gonna do, so like every little thing they did, they reflected on it. And so we spent a lot of time, Dawn and I especially, spent a lot of time designing those reflection questions so that they weren't, so that they were really open-ended, so that like that they generate a lot of thought. And y'all know if you write a lot of reflection questions, it's easier than it sounds. So we really did spend a lot of time on that so that we would have something to comment on, you know, when we gave feedback. And then there can be other outputs too. I put all those question marks just because I don't want it, you know, anybody to think that the way we did it is the way, you know, that you have to do it. You may think of, and I'm sure you will think of things way better than the things that we did. But so the interaction
Robin.
is, I'll just say this right quick. So the interaction is with the content, with one another, and with the thinking partner. So, okay, so go ahead, Carla, I'm sorry.
I just wondered if in the 3 hours of learning, you guys included time for them to figure out how they were going to implement it with learners.
Yeah, so that
Was there any planning time in your 3 hours?
So that's a great question. We did not build that into the 3 hours that they would spend like interacting with the course stuff. And then, but we gave them, so like I've taught online for like a number of years, like teachers. So it was my idea to do the Wednesday to Tuesday so that like teachers have a weekend. So a week is Wednesday to Tuesday. And that's when we saw the most activity on the course. And so I think, Carla, that is when they did that. And then typically we wouldn't see like the lesson plans come in, like student samples or whatever,
Right.
until Tuesday. But we also gave them, so like if they couldn't get that part done, then they could do it next week or the next. So like just by the time the course was over, try out the week 1 things sometime between now and when the course is over. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You can't always just turn on a dime.
What type of inputs? Oh,
Right. Right.
I was curious to know, like, what type of inputs do you think the learners like really, I don't know, what gave you like your most bang for your buck? Like, did anybody comment on anything, or like, did you see like more participation with certain things?
So they loved the PowerPoints because in many cases they used those, they were right there and they used them with their students. So like I did a Save Me Matter PowerPoint, an equity and table PowerPoint. They used those with their students and generated student writing. So it's like, you know, they like a lesson that's already done that they can use as is or tweak it a little bit, you know. So I would say that probably was
That's so interesting,
isn't it? Yep. All right, so questions.
I guess conversely, now I'm curious to know, like, were there things that, I mean, I guess it's hard for you to know because you don't like see right into their heads, but times when you saw like less participation, like what types of input or output you were asking them to do that garnered like less enthusiasm or engagement?
They didn't like talking to one another on the discussion forum. And we weren't, you know, I mean, we're writing project people. That's our favorite part, right? But every week we gave them a survey and they said what was the most helpful and what was the least helpful. And it was always interacting on the discussion forum was the least helpful, which we were like, what? How can that even be? But they were very honest about what was helpful and what wasn't helpful.
Okay.
Oh, and one other thing, so like Padlet, so like I guess y'all are gonna do credentials. We did, you know, the badging, the micro credentials. Like if you do Padlet, you know, that like, I didn't know, like I had 12 teachers or 13 that I was assigned to, like to check off whether they had done the things. Well, I did, you know, we found out very quickly, we don't know, like a Jamboard Post-it note, unless they remembered to put their name. So you could, and there were some things I would see in the Padlet or on the Jamboard, and I would think, wow, that's really good. I wonder if one of my learners did that, because I'd like to get
Yeah,
feedback on that, but I don't know. Hey, did you do the green Post-it note on the Jamboard that was over on the left side towards the bottom? I mean, so, you know,
Yeah.
one of the things that we talked about, we don't know. And also, but what we did know is not everybody did it because there weren't enough Post-its, right? So it almost seemed like if there, this is terrible, but if there wasn't accountability, like there was no way to.
Yeah. Like they're humans, like, you know, just like.
And they're busy humans. So they're like, oh, she won't know if I did that Padlet or not. You know, she won't know if I did the Jamboard or not.
I see.
So, yeah, but y'all have a big task doing a year long.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
What about you guys? You're right there with us. I don't know what you're thinking.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I know y'all are having fun. And we did, I mean, Haley knows, I mean, I hyperdocked everything.
Mhm.
So I just decided like, what are the inputs? And I put everything in a hyperdoc. And then I would actually work through it to see if that was 3 hours worth of stuff, you know.
Robin, did you guys worry about providing an asynchronous option for participants?
It was all asynchronous.
Okay, it was all asynchronous, like you guys never met synchronously in like a Zoom or anything?
No, unless somebody was having a lot of trouble with the platform and
Oh,
requested it.
interesting.
But
Okay,
it was all asynchronous.
Okay.
interesting. That's fun.
So are you gonna, how are you gonna do that?
Well, I don't think we've talked about that yet. I mean, I don't know that we've,
We're still kind of just like deciding what should be in each like
Right.
yeah. Well, you know, or a little past that, but like still sort of just deciding what is even going to be there and in what order.
Got it, yeah. Well, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
If you could like have gone back, now that you've like facilitated it, if you could change anything, what would you do differently?
I think content wise, so a lot of people complained at the, I will say, the elementary teachers complained some that things seem to be more high schoolish. And and so like high school teachers could of course just like use the PowerPoints that we created because
Yeah,
you know, it's going to be something an adult is going to be real engaged in. And so I would change that. I would like add more, and I mean, I'm an elementary teacher, but I would add more options for elementary. So they also complained about the Harris moves seemed very high schoolish, and we didn't like change our
show its young possibility.
Yeah. So I would do more options for elementary, this would look like in
Okay.
elementary school, or elementary student samples, because we didn't.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
All right, see you on the other
Thank
side.
you.
Hi, someone's still recording, I think.
That's, yeah, I'm gonna actually start recording.